Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you're having a great day so far. As you can tell by the title of the video, today I'm going to be talking about my miscarriage story. I'm not really sure where to start this story, but I guess I could go back all the way to 2016 when my husband and I were engaged and we were planning our wedding and our life. We decided that we were going to wait 4 years before we had kids because we wanted to enjoy living together, being together. We wanted to travel, and so 2020 sounded like the perfect year. When we got married, whenever anybody asked us when we were having kids, we would tell them that 2020 was the year we wanted to have kids. So 2020 came around and I was still in school because I started nursing school and I was in my 4th semester, which is the last semester, and we talked to family, we talked to a few friends, and we decided that we could start. I think this was back in, I'm sorry, I wasn't in 4th semester, I think I was in 3rd semester. No, I was in the summer before I started my 3rd semester because I was going to start that 3rd semester in August. And we were like, okay, well, if we get pregnant, I'm sure I could finish school, but I don't think we will because I'm not super young. I was 26, so we were like, okay, it might take some time. We also knew some family who were struggling to get pregnant, and we decided that maybe we can try because we didn't know what the situation was until we started. And to our surprise, we got pregnant the very first time, and I was over the moon. That week, I started feeling weird. I think it was a bit too early, so it might have been all in my head, but I started feeling weird. I started feeling a little nauseous. My body felt different, and I wanted to tell my husband, and I think I mentioned it a few times, but I wanted to surprise him, and I didn't want him to be like, oh, let's take a test. So I kept it to myself. It was just a few days after, we did the deed. And I mentioned it to my sister because it was around the time I was supposed to get my period, but I didn't want to take the test too early. But she said she would give me a pregnancy test. So she brought it home that day and I took it. I think it was a Monday. I don't really remember if it was a Monday or a Tuesday, but she came home with the test and I believe I took it the next morning. And it was positive, and I was so excited. So I sent her pictures, I sent her a video because she was working, so I couldn't call her, and I confirmed that I was pregnant. And so I told her that she was the only one, that she couldn't tell anybody until I told my husband, and then we'd see from there. So that same day after I took the test, I went out, I think it was Marshall's, and I went and I got some onesies to be able to surprise my husband with the onesies when he came home. I think it was just the onesies and the pregnancy test that I was going to put in like an Amazon box. And when he asked about the package, I was going to let him know that, I just opened it. It's something I ordered. I can't remember what it is. And that's what we did. My sister helped me out. She was the one recording. So he got home and he asked about the Amazon box on the sofa, and I told him to open it because I hadn't had time to open it. And so when he opened it, he had the surprise that we were pregnant, and he could not believe it. He could not believe it because I'm telling you, it was so quick. It was the first time we tried. I hadn't even tracked anything. Because, you hear people that they track their period and they track their discharge to see what time in their ovulation stage they're at. And I hadn't done any of it. It was just, we just decided to try it. We tried, got pregnant. So he was shocked. We were over the moon. He was very happy. I think I also got him a mug that said, "I love Dad." And so we were excited. I was over here thinking like, I feel pregnant. This is so weird. I feel a little nauseous. I wonder if I'm gonna get cravings. We were excited. We were already like, I wonder if it's a boy or a girl. We already had names for them since we were dating before we were even married. We had names for our kids because we always said we wanted 4 kids. So we had names for them. So we were like, okay, if it's a boy, we're gonna name him this. If it's a girl, we're gonna name her this. And is he or she gonna look like me? Is he or she gonna look like you? It was beautiful, all smiles. Awesome. I loved that. I loved being able to tell him because we shared the joy we were both feeling, and I remember it just felt so beautiful. So the week passed, and I went to back to Marshall's to buy mugs for our parents that said grandma and grandpa on them. And that Friday, we surprised my parents during dinner because they actually live in the house in front of us. So where we live, it's a duplex. We live in the back house and they live in the front house. And we had dinner outside in our yard, and we surprised them with the news. And they were very excited. It's their first grandkids, so of course they were super excited. That Sunday, we were supposed to surprise his parents because we were going to celebrate his dad's birthday, which is July 26th, I believe. I think so. So that was the plan, and I think that Friday when we told them that we were pregnant, me and my mom had gone on a walk, and I usually never went on walks, but I'm really bad at exercising. But that day, I hadn't told my mom yet, but I was excited to tell her because my mom always went on walks. So when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, I'm going to go on walks. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to exercise to keep this baby healthy. So I was excited to start going on walks with my mom. So that morning I went. And during that walk, I felt weird. Something happened to my body. I don't really know what it is. I don't even really know how to explain it. But it felt really weird. It felt like I had to pee. Like it was just a very strong feeling of having to go pee. And it wouldn't go away. But I knew I didn't have to pee. It was just different. It's something I had never felt before. And the more I walked, the stronger the feeling got. So I actually kept it to myself because I hadn't told my mom, so I still wanted it to be a surprise, and I thought it was something normal with pregnancy, and it may be normal, but so I kept it to myself. I didn't tell her. We got home, and then later that night, that's when we told my parents. But so the next morning on Saturday, I woke up with cramps. I had a lot of cramping, like on the regular cramping, like period cramps. And I had bleeding. I'm not an expert, obviously. It was my first pregnancy. I had never gotten pregnant before, but I did know that some women experience implantation bleeding and implantation cramping, so I assumed that's what it was. Again, I didn't know how early I was. I didn't know how many weeks I was. I had just taken the test literally that week, so I didn't know how many weeks. I didn't know how pregnant I was, so I assumed it was implantation bleeding, which it could have been. And then as the day went on, as Saturday went on, the cramping continued, and I believe it started increasing. It became more painful, and the bleeding definitely started increasing to the point where I was seeing, now that I look back, it was tissue that I was seeing when I went to the restroom. But as I looked on the internet, because it's such a bad habit to look online when you start feeling symptoms, but I do it all the time. And so when I started bleeding and feeling cramping, I went online to, verify that it could be implantation bleeding. And I did read that if there was tissue when you went to the restroom, it could mean you were having a miscarriage. So I was in denial. I was, no, it's normal. It's normal. I don't think that's tissue. It's just probably accumulated blood. But now looking back, I want to say it probably was tissue. I was super early. I was only 5 weeks pregnant when it happened, so I don't think there was much. But your body does go through a lot to change and make room for that baby that will be developing inside your body. I mean, I don't know how much is normal at that stage of a pregnancy. And so the bleeding continued to Sunday. It was more painful on Sunday. I told my husband what was going on since it started on Saturday, and we both agreed that maybe we should hold back in telling his parents that we were pregnant because we didn't know if this was implantation bleeding. We didn't know if it was normal bleeding. I hadn't gone to the doctor. I called the advice line, I believe. The nurse and the doctor that I spoke to said it was normal, that it could be normal for some pregnancies, and that I just had to monitor it if the bleeding got worse or if the pain got worse or if I started having shoulder pain, that I should go into the emergency room. And so since we didn't know what it was, we hadn't gone to get checked out. We didn't even have an ultrasound. We didn't have confirmation that I was pregnant. We didn't end up telling them. The next morning on Monday, I felt worse. My whole body felt like it had been hit by a car. tired. I was worried. I was scared. I was also in denial. I remember my sister stayed home. She didn't go to work, and she stayed with me, and we watched movies all day. It was an attempt to try and get what was going on out of our minds. And I remember I was going to the restroom every 2 minutes because I just had the urge to go. And every time I went, there was more blood. There was times when I did go and there was no blood. So I was starting to get a little more hope. I was like, okay, you know, this may be going away. It's getting better. Maybe it was implantation bleeding and now it's gone. And so that's how I spent all Monday, in bed watching movies with my sister and then with my husband once he got home from work. On Tuesday, I woke up, and it's usually the day that my parents go to work. And that day, I remember I woke up and I had shoulder pain, so I ran over to their house and I told them what I was feeling, and I told them what the doctor had told me. So they suggested that I go into the emergency room. I was hoping that I didn't have to go. I was in denial still, and I decided to call instead, to call the advice line, I believe it's called. And I spoke to the nurse. The nurse was really sweet. I remember to this day what she told me, and it actually helped me a lot. She said, okay, I see that you are very stressed. I can hear in your voice that you are sad and this is scaring you. She's like, but right now you need to be strong for that baby, just in case that baby is completely fine. But once you go in, and if they tell you that you did lose your baby, that you are no longer pregnant, go home, take a bath. She's like, cry it out, yell, scream. She's like, you need to be able to do whatever it takes to feel better, whether that means you are gonna cry all day, all week, or you're gonna yell and kick when you get home. You have every right to feel that way, but right now you need to be strong and you need to walk into that emergency room and you need to find out what's going on. So I did. I went, and my husband was at work and my sister was at work. I called them, I let them know what's going on. They both wanted to come home, but I told them it was okay, that I had to go anyways. It was COVID. I could only go by myself. I'm not sure if my sister ended up going with me again. I think she went back to work. I can't remember. But I went into the emergency room, and let me tell you, sitting there waiting was the scariest thing. When they took my blood pressure, it was super high. I can't remember the exact number, but it was up there because I was panicking. I was scared. I was hoping that everything was okay, but I had a gut feeling that nothing was okay. So as I waited in the waiting room and was finally admitted, I started to panic. I remember I called my mom, I called my dad. I was crying. I was explaining to them that I was scared, that I didn't want to lose this baby, that why me? Why did it happen to me? I lost it, but every time the doctor or the nurse walked in, I managed to pick myself back up. I'm sure that they saw it in my face that I wasn't okay whenever they came in to see me. So what they did was an intravaginal ultrasound in order to check to see if it was an ectopic pregnancy, because that's what shoulder pain means. The doctor also examined me. He said that my cervix was closed, but I was bleeding still. So I waited for the results to come back, and while I waited, I prayed. I think I just sat there kind of in shock, hoping for the best. And then the doctor came in and he said that the results for the intravaginal didn't show anything. There was nothing there. There's usually a little sac where the baby is developing at that stage, at that point, according to what my period had been. According to my last period, the week should have been about 5 weeks, which meant that the sac should have been there, but it wasn't. He did say that my HCG levels in my blood were low, but he said it could be early still, that maybe the timing was off. What he suggested is that I go back in a few days and do another blood test. I think I had to go back every couple days in order to continue to check the levels of HCG in my blood. And if they increased, that meant that the pregnancy was healthy and thriving. And if it was going low, it did mean that I had a miscarriage. So I went home kind of in the same boat. I did know I didn't have an ectopic pregnancy because they checked for that, but I also knew that there was no sign of a baby in my uterus. But I had HCG levels, which meant I was pregnant, or I was pregnant at a point. So I kind of went home and I still felt very, I don't even know how to explain it. I was just very confused. I was very sad. I wanted the whole process to just be over. I remember I told my my sister, and I told Lalo, my husband, that I just wanted it to be over. Like, I just wanted to know. I just wanted to know the results. I was like, I just want to know if the baby's okay. I just want to know if the baby's not okay. I need to know, because not knowing what was going on was driving me crazy. I couldn't sleep. I just couldn't. I needed to know. And I mean, there was nothing I could do. I think I went to the emergency room on a Tuesday, and so I had to go back Tuesday, Wednesday. I think I had to go back Thursday or Friday, I think they told me. I can't remember if I went back Thursday or Friday, but that whole week, it was just miserable. I think I was bleeding, but very lightly. I remember I was just praying so hard every day that this baby would be safe, that it would be healthy, that there was a miracle somehow, that I really needed a miracle. I wanted a miracle so bad. And that day came by, and I went to get my second blood test drawn, and the results came back that same afternoon, and I wasn't pregnant. My levels had dropped to about almost 0, and the doctor did call me, and he said, unfortunately, this means that you did have a miscarriage. He said that it looked that I was about 5 weeks pregnant when I lost that baby. And I remember I felt horrible. It felt horrible to get that news, but I also felt relieved, because I needed to know. I needed to know what to do. My body needed to know what to do. I was tired of hoping. I was tired of not knowing. I wanted my hope to turn into a miracle, but I also wanted to just get the information back. And when I did, I remember I felt very relieved, but obviously very, very sad. And I cried, and when Lalo came home, I told him, and we just kind of sat in silence. And I remember telling him, well, this is probably for the best. That baby may have not survived if he continued, or if she continued to develop. I remember I actually took it very well, and I don't know if it was because I was in shock, because I had already spent a whole week crying and thinking the worst, that when I finally knew the truth, my body didn't know how to react. And I just kind of, I don't know, I remember that my days after that were just kind of like melting into one day. I don't really remember anything much. I had always been the person that always thought a miscarriage would never happen to me. I heard of miscarriages, I had heard of losses, pregnancy losses, but for me, I always said, it's not gonna happen to me. That's not for me. That's not a thing that would happen to me. And when it did, I was very shocked that it did. Especially because I did grow up Christian, and I grew up being told and being reminded that if we prayed, things worked out. That if we prayed, everything was gonna be okay. And it wasn't. It was really hard when it wasn't okay. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know. I remember I was angry at God, and I told him, I questioned him. I was just very hurt, because I had already envisioned a whole life with this baby. I had already made plans. I had already had names. I already saw the future. It hurt me to see my husband in pain too, because I could see it in his eyes. And I was just so mad at God for the first few days. And then finally, it just felt calm, and I decided to, instead of being mad, I decided to be thankful. And it helped me heal in that way, but I feel like there was more that I could have done. I feel like I could have talked to somebody, because I was in my grief all by myself. I didn't tell any of my close friends. The only people that knew were Lalo, my husband, my sister, and my parents. I was just in this bubble where I was ashamed to tell anyone that we were pregnant, and that I was so happy, and that I was planning my whole life with this baby, and then the baby was just gone. I didn't want to have to tell people that, because I thought that they wouldn't understand. And so I felt alone. I started looking on YouTube actually to see if there was women I could relate to. I started searching, miscarriage stories, and hearing some women here on YouTube talk about it helped me heal so much. That is part of the reason why I decided to share it here on YouTube as well, because it did help me heal. But I do wish that I would have had, or that I would have talked to somebody about it, because I didn't give myself enough time to grieve. So I'm the type of person that when bad things happen, I push them to the side. I push them to the back of my head and I ignore them. Whenever a thought pops in my head, I start doing something else. I'll start cleaning, I'll start watching TV, I'll do anything else but think about it. And that was the same with my pregnancy. And my thoughts in my head, I remember, and I don't think I've ever said this out loud even to myself, that if I didn't get on it and try to have another baby, the sadness was going to consume me, because I started panicking. I had so much anxiety. I needed to get pregnant again, because I was so scared that if I waited, my sadness would just like suck me in, and I was gonna become this sad person, and I didn't want that to happen. And I know it's very like, it doesn't make sense, but in my head, I thought that the longer I took before trying, the more chance I was gonna have of losing a baby again, or the more time that passed. I don't know. I just needed to get pregnant again. And I think because I didn't have my emotions under control and I didn't have enough time to grieve, I think that contributed to my high-risk pregnancy that then came. We did get pregnant a month after we had our miscarriage. I didn't even have my period, and from the very beginning, I remember any little thing that I felt, I went into panic mode, because I was scared that it was gonna happen all over again. And so my whole pregnancy, I lived scared. Everything that I felt, everything that felt a little funny, even just throwing up scared me, because it just gave me so anxiety that something was not okay. And my pregnancy ended up being a high-risk pregnancy. They actually were monitoring me for preeclampsia, which, if you don't know, it's very dangerous for the baby and for the mom. So I didn't develop preeclampsia, but my blood pressure was very up there. I had anxiety my whole pregnancy, and I think it was due to the fact that I didn't allow myself to heal properly, but instead I just jumped right into trying to get pregnant again. With that, I want to end this by giving you a bit of advice. The first one is that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sad. It doesn't matter how long it takes you. It could be a week, it could be months. If anything, I think it's important to grieve, because I didn't give myself a time to grieve, and my following pregnancy was a mess. I was a mess the whole time. And I know that it's hard sometimes to grieve, to give yourself time to grieve, because life goes on, and you may think that I gave myself enough time, but don't ever force yourself to get over something if you're not ready. Number 2, it's not your fault. I spent so much time blaming myself, thinking of things that I could have done differently to prevent it. I remember saying, maybe if I wouldn't have gone on that walk, I wouldn't have been okay. Maybe I lifted something before I knew I was pregnant, and it was heavy and it cost this. Maybe I didn't eat enough healthy things. Maybe I don't know, I turned wrong at night and I squished the baby that was in there. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what my thoughts were, but I spent so much time blaming myself. And so I want you to know that it is not your fault. There is nothing you could have done differently to have changed that. And it's important to remember that, because it'll eat you up. Your body just sometimes it does what it does. And the way I saw it is maybe that baby would have had a hard life, or something would have been wrong with that baby later on in my pregnancy, and that is why it had to happen. If you're going through this, remember, it's not your fault. I don't know how many times I want to say this, but it's not your fault. Okay, it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself, because it's not your fault. And number 3, something that I found very hard to understand was my husband's grieving. His was very different from mine. Mine was, I wanted to talk about it with him all the time. I kept asking him, how are you feeling? Because I feel this way. And he wouldn't be able to tell me. He would just kind of say, well, I feel the same as you. And that frustrated me, because I wanted to know how he felt, because I could see it in his face, and I wanted him to say it, because in my head, even though I wasn't doing this, I wanted him to say it so that he could feel better, and I wanted him to say it so that we could move on. And I felt like I was pushing him so much. But we need to remember that they grieve differently, because they're men. They're just different. And maybe it's not even because he's a man, he's just another person. He grieves differently. We all do. You know, my mom does grieve differently than me. My dad grieves differently than me. My sister definitely grieves differently than me. And so it's important to remember that, because then there could be a point where you're comparing their grief to yours, and you may think that it doesn't hurt them as much as you, and that may hurt you. But the reality is they may be hurting just as much or even more then they're letting on. And sometimes if we try to push them, we affect the way they feel even more. So those are just 3 things that I thought I'd remind you, or that I'd advise you to remember while you're going through this. If you're going through this, I'm so sorry. I know exactly how you feel. It is the hardest thing in the world to go through. It is very painful. And I just wish that I could hug everybody, because I was in that situation where I just wanted a hug. I actually deprived myself of that. And I think it was because I was very ashamed. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. 1 in every 4 women goes through this. And it may feel like you're alone, but you're not. There's a lot of us out there that have gone through this. And I want to say that I am here for you. I understand you. I know what it feels like. I understand, and I know, and I wish I could hug you. And I hope this story helped you a little bit. It gets easier as time goes by. It's still very painful to talk about, but it's also gotten easier. I did get my little miracle. I have my happy, healthy, he's about to turn 4 months, little man, and it's beautiful. And I wanted to tell this story as a way to honor that child, that baby, that pregnancy that I lost. And I wanted to be able to be there for somebody who might not have anyone, or who might feel like they don't have anyone. But I encourage you to reach out, whether it's a friend, a parent, a sibling, or a therapist. I encourage you to talk to somebody, because it's very lonely to try and go through it by yourself. And so I just wanted to end letting you know that I am here for you, that I know how it feels. I just hope that one day you get that little miracle that you've been waiting for. I'm just very thankful that I am able to relate to so many women in this way. And I feel like because I went through this, I appreciate my little baby just that much more. And if there's anything you'd like to tell me, or you'd like to ask me, go ahead and leave a comment. Maybe there's other women who need that support. It'd be amazing if we all left some support down in the comments. Thanks again for being here and listening to my story. I hope I see you next time. Bye.